Thank you for joining us on this edition of Central Mass Chronicles. Central Mass Chronicles is just that. It's a show in which we come at things from a Central Mass point of view. And we talk about national issues, we talk about local issues, we talk about issues that are happening in the state. We begin this week with our panel. Steve Jones-D'Agostino, Randy Feldman, Mark Henderson. Mark Henderson joining us for the first time. He runs a site called the 016. It's where you should start your day at the 016.com, where all media comes to hang out. And that's why I'm going to start with him for our first topic today. And that is, there is a new term that is out there.
Yes.
It's called ghost newspapers.
Yes. Unfortunately,
the Telegram and Gazette, our daily paper of record, is becoming the poster child for this, because ghost newspapers refer to where you still have a daily newspaper, but the people of the community look at it and go, this isn't what it was. It isn't what it was even just a few years ago. Now, fair or unfair, one of the reasons that ghost newspaper has been used when it comes to the Telegram is because Clyde McFarland, columnist, 26 years at the paper, was let go. And it's just the latest in a long string of cuts. My issue is that you don't have a columnist. You want to let a columnist go, you don't agree, the paper's going in a different direction. We found somebody that's going to write something different. That's one thing. This is somebody else has got to go, another salary's got to be saved. All right, our daily paper of record has no columnists.
Well, that's a very difficult thing, and I think we all know Clive, and he was a good guy, and he was a great asset to the local paper, and losing him is very, very difficult, right? And yes, everybody's talking about it because it's such a public institution, and it's been around so long, and it is such an integral part of news and information in and around the city of Worcester. But what I say is, yes, the ghost newspaper, whether it fits that category or not, I'll leave that for others. But, part of this, one of the reasons we started the 016 in a way to, corral all the great local news and information that's being produced in the city is because there is quite a lot. And there's another term that people use nowadays, which is news deserts. And news deserts are a place where there's just nobody minding any, there's just a lack of news and information being produced. And what we've said at the 016 is that Worcester is not a news desert. We have a lot of great news and information being produced. It's not all done by the singular daily newspaper, but it's being produced. And I'll start here at Channel 3. I'll go to the Talk of the Commonwealth. I talk about Business Beat. So Worcester is not in danger of being a news desert. And one of the reasons we came in and started the 016 is a way to find where all that great local content is and put it all in one place. And what we're finding is that people are responding to it because they didn't know it was all out there, or we're saving them time from going to all these different
outlets. And people are
outlets.
responding because, Randy, they're still looking for that local news. Now, I'm gonna pick up on something that Mark said. I don't think that the T&G yet is a ghost newspaper. When I look at places like the Gardner News or the Sentinel and Enterprise, where nobody's covering City Hall anymore, the Sentinel and Enterprise, those poor reporters don't even have a building to report to anymore. I mean, I think those are really becoming ghost newspapers. But the T&G, our fear is that it's headed that way.
Yeah, like some people make the point of view that the T&G will still have Nick Kostopoulos, who will cover City Hall, the meetings, the council meetings, and the city manager. But all the level below those people that used to get covered, all the Human Rights Commission meetings and the zoning board and the planning board, that there's not as much of that going on as there used to be. And it really raises, I think there's a local issue and then there's a macro issue, a nationwide issue. Locally, it was pretty unusual that Clyde McFarland was last man standing, given that the antecedents of the Telegram and Gazette are Robert Nemeth, an extremely conservative editorial page, right? And there was Clyde McFarland having the run of the place for such a long time as its only columnist. So part of it is it political? Is it not want to be known as a liberal newspaper? Is that it? Was it simply financial? Is it just part of a national thing where if we're going to be buying USA Today and the Gannett chain, we have to be business people, hard-edged, hard-nosed. We have to get rid of higher salaries, and if that's the case, what we have to really talk about is what both of you do, and what you do is this integration of this whole new world of electronic media, internet-based, radio-based, texting, all the different things that Twitter, all the integration of this whole new media making up for not being a newspaper.
But
it's
Steve,
a new way to look at things.
But does it make up? So you do the business beat on WICN, but that's a
once a
niche.
week.
That's
That's a
right,
niche.
exactly. So Mark, you're
And
collecting
it's
all
not
of that,
journalism.
but does it make?
It's not journalism in the classic sense. It's not news reporting. We need a news reporting platform in this city, in this county. We don't have one now, for the most part, with the Telegram and Gazette. It's no longer the daily, the newspaper of record. Even online, it's got a circulation of what, about 35,000, down from more than 120,000 more than a decade ago. In a city that has more than 180,000 people, in a county that has over 600,000 people, it's no longer the paper of record. And it's largely no longer a newspaper or a news, it's infotainment, as are too many news, quote unquote, news outlets out there. I think what we need more than anything, and it sounds like I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent, but we need to restore civics education in our public schools so that we have knowledgeable, informed citizens. And when you have them, they're going to be hungry for news, not for infotainment.
And
then
where are they
there'll be a
gonna get it?
market, a monetary market for that kind of
Why isn't there
content.
then a market right now, though, Steve, for
Because
that?
we've dumbed down America.
But my kids will never, my kids would never go to the newsstand today and pay $3 for a paper that
But
is
we're
that
talking
big.
about going online, and you can see the ads, and you can get paid for eyeballs. You know
Yeah.
better about how this is measured than
Yeah.
I do. But if you're not going to the website and you're not seeing the ads because the website is lacking in news content or is lacking in the kind of content that you find valuable, then no eyeballs or not enough eyeballs are going to see it to monetize
Yeah,
it
exactly.
enough.
Everybody talks about new models for journalism and those things, but the old model still works, which is if you have enough eyeballs that this will act, that this model works. If you have enough eyeballs, then you can sell.
Well,
then
you're
you
actually
sell
working
around.
at an excellent model with the 016. You monetize that, you make enough money, you set up a nonprofit, you use it to fund the nonprofit, which is what the Pew Charitable Trust is
and what we
encouraging organizations
And
to do.
then what we do is drive
nationwide.
traffic to make sure that people
Right. And then there's a firewall between the for-profit and the
that.
nonprofit.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing is that.
But that's gonna take years to develop.
But the delivery of this to make sense is lacking because it's the media space is so fractured. You have social media platforms and websites and
Right.
blogs, and the goal that we had is like, well, let's convene all this stuff, and so people will look there and see, on any given day, by default, we're going to have more than any.
But let's get back then to the paper itself and some of the things that all of you have brought up. Does the paper itself, though, have some type of a moral responsibility as what should be the paper of record for the second largest city in New England to do more than say, well, we're going to make, because I think their model and the Gannett model is hey, we're going to make money because we're going to do like the Dragon Boat races, and we have this great platform to be able to promote that we're doing those kinds of events. I'm willing to bet that if I go to Mass Live, the story that got the most clicks, it might not be the news story of the day. It might be, I ate 32 different kinds of Oreos so that you don't have to. Oh, I got to see how those are ranked.
Yeah.
So what are we sort of telling?
I think as long as they can claim to be the paper of record, they have a moral responsibility. If they shed that tag, then they can be whatever they want, a shopper as far as I'm concerned. But the minute you cop that attitude, you better deliver, and they're not delivering.
Mark made two great points before we started. One was you had 10,000 hits before 12 o'clock.
Right. Well, we got before 10 o'clock this morning.
Before 10 o'clock this morning, 10,000 hits on the 016. And the second was, you talked about how in the old days with the newspaper, not everybody read it from cover to cover. Some people, why don't you explain what happened in the old days typically?
Yeah, so we sold a lot of copies, but there was no data to suggest that people all read the same thing, right? This was a product that could be purchased by the CEO and everybody below him, and some people didn't read all the journalism. What you'd hope is that the journalism is being created and that we're getting in front of people. That's the only thing that you can hope for, and whether it's a for-profit, nonprofit, it really doesn't matter as long as you have somebody committed to producing that type of journalism. But, so to say that we had people reading it, 100,000 people reading all the journalism that was being produced. There's no data that supports that.
They didn't.
It was always
even in the era of print newspapers only, nobody read everything.
Exactly. But they were
Maybe
all
the
informed
comic
because
strips, but that's about it.
they were reading the headlines and they were understanding what the issues were.
Right.
And that's one of the things that we hope to bring
the
back.
editorial.
Versus Facebook links or news where you might be reading something that didn't go through any editorial process.
Yeah.
There's no attempt to be objective, and it's not the same thing as a newspaper.
Yeah.
But let me, and I'm going to stay with this just for one extra minute, but what is the product then? I mean,
Yeah.
so what is it that we're selling or that people want to buy now? Is it simply everybody over the age of 60 goes, I don't know, I've subscribed to the paper forever, and there's 30,000 some odd people who will continue to do that? And what's the product going to be? Your 10,000 hits this morning says to me, and I bet the TNG had even more than that.
Yeah.
It says to me
Oh,
that
yeah,
there's a market for it.
No, there is
Are most of your clicks infotainment or the news stuff? The hard news or infotainment?
Well, we do. I mean, we have the news of the weird and all that stuff.
Okay.
But most of the stuff that we do is all the local stuff that people haven't seen anywhere.
But is that what
Right.
you're getting a lot of clicks
Oh,
on,
absolutely.
or is it on the weird
No,
news
it's all.
stuff?
It's on the. It's on the.
Good.
It's on the
That's-
news.
that's
there is-
hopeful then.
So right,
That's
so
hopeful.
there is that product. Hey, coming up, we're going to talk about the red flag laws. Is this the proper response to the latest two shootings in America, in Dayton and in El Paso? And we'll start with that straight ahead.
Kevin and Andy do not share every talent. This is one they do share.
Holy Name has a great program.
Kevin and Andy do not share every talent. This is one they do share.
Holy Name has a great staff as well.
Elizabeth Warren talks about the 1%. She is the 1%. Now, if you really are so concerned about the little guy and the average guy and the middle income person, where are you? Too bad that our own Congressman, Jim McGovern, doesn't have the fortitude to stand up and speak on behalf of the people in his community. They all go to Congress with no money in their pocket, and they all leave there as millionaires. How does that happen?
You can't get Worcester weather from a Boston TV station. The sun could be shining in downtown Boston, but the weather could be very different here in Worcester. People tell me all the time how much they count on our weather forecast, and we know how important that is to our Worcester News Tonight viewers. Each weekday, we'll give you your weather, your 10-day forecast for right here in Worcester, only on Worcester News Tonight.
Worcester's only local forecast, weeknights on Worcester News Tonight.
Red flag laws. In the wake of the shooting, once again, we're looking at ways in which we as Americans and through the federal government can react. And the red flag law seems to be what is being talked about the most. And I'll start with you, Randy. So the red flag law, just very quickly, you are a family member. You see someone, and often these shootings come with a job loss or a relationship breakup. There is something that oftentimes will bring on one of these mass shootings. And as a family member or someone close to the individual, you see something, it raises a red flag. We all see the stories after the fact about, this was a red flag. Why didn't somebody do something about it? Geez, here he is. Look at what he posted on Facebook. Why didn't somebody do anything about this? These red flag laws would allow a family member to call up the chief of police, for example, and he comes and you have your day in court, but perhaps you, for a year or so, should not have, your AR-15. What do you think about red flag laws?
So that's part of it. I thought the other part of a red flag, well, I guess it's definitional. We don't know yet until there's 17 states that apparently have red flag laws, but is also that the police themselves do the red flag, not the family member. It's both things that can occur, right? And it's the big thing nationally, obviously, is universal background checks. 90% of Americans want universal background checks. It looked like the president had supported universal background checks. Just yesterday, he walked away from universal background checks at the behest of the gun lobby, of the NRA. So now it looks like we're going to only discuss the red flag law. Again, it reminds me a little bit if somebody's going for going to court to get a restraining order on somebody, right? It's a temporary thing, I think. It's not clearly defined yet. If you want a restraining order on somebody, you are depriving them of their liberty, their movement to act freely. So what they do is they give you a very short one, usually 10 days, and then there's a hearing on whether or not the state, the government, has the right to take away part of your freedom, right? So I think the red flag laws are going to work similarly. You know, there'll be something temporary that think that we're in danger because of your mental state. And then after that, there will be a hearing most likely to see whether or not this should be extended for a longer period of time. I would think that mirroring the restraining order methodology would be very intelligent. You know, in Worcester, in the Massachusetts, when it comes to firearms, you have to get a permit from the chief of police in your locality in order to get a firearm. That's not true nationally, but it seems like a very common sense way of handling something as dangerous as a firearm, and you would hope that the rest of the country would emulate us.
Yeah, actually, that's an interesting point, Steve. One of the things is a lot of the conversation around the country is do people emulate Massachusetts laws? But the red flags laws in particular seem to have some bipartisan support.
Well, they do. I mean, the both on the left and the right, I think, support it for a bunch of different reasons. But I think it's an entry point, and there's a lot more that needs to be done. There was an article on NPR that quotes Amy Swearer, a senior legal policy advisor at the conservative-leaning Heritage Foundation, and she describes these kinds of laws as an intermediate measure, and I agree with her. She points to data from Connecticut, a state that's had one of these laws since 1999. And the data show that it's been used to remove firearms in all kinds of situations, violent threats against school officials, co-workers, wives, girlfriends, children, especially cases of possible suicide. However, she goes on to note, now there are legitimate underlying fears in the sense that if these laws are not properly narrowed, that if they're not using specific enough language, that if they're not being couched in appropriate measures of due process, that it can open the door for a lot of abuse. So, for example, we could have packing while black and mentally ill. This is a very racist country. It'd be very easy for us to descend into just bust a black person who's mentally ill and carrying a gun.
Well, I guess this,
and not a white person who's doing the same thing.
No, I understand. I mean, but this is also a fear where, I mean, a lot of the pushback originally when red flag laws were brought up here in the Commonwealth was that you would have a family member. Well, my family member, my mom hates me. And so my mom doesn't want me to have a weapon.
You
but
mean
not
hypothetical?
Because, right, yes. But not because I shouldn't have one, but because, you know, I don't know, my mom hates me or my sister hates me. And the feeling was, and the government is just waiting to grab my gun anyway, so I don't have, I get my day in court, but you know what? I don't have a chance because the judge wants to take my gun, the police chief wants to take my gun, my mom wants to take my gun.
Yeah, and I think.
But are you certifiably mentally ill?
Well,
Not
but
yet.
this is right. But this is the thing. But this was the pushback here. The pushback here is that what is going to happen? That you would have, you know, this abuse of it.
Well, and that's the big fear. It's not what the intention of the law is. It's how the law is written and how it is seen by the courts. There are all, you know, there are good intentions everywhere. Okay, but if you could have the same law in Massachusetts and the same law in Texas, and they could be handled two different ways, right? Depends on how it's executed locally. I mean, in theory, this is a very good idea, right? It's how it's in practice and how it's put in practice in Massachusetts versus Connecticut versus Texas or Alabama, and it is open to widespread abuse. There are the laws around civil forfeiture, which was a big thing a few years ago, where they would take proceeds from crimes being committed, and you saw massive abuses in that system to the point where the government had to step in and say, we're not going to do this anymore, right? So it was something that was well-intentioned but went too far. I think, to me, that's where it all comes down. These things are very well-intentioned, but you can already see how this could, to Steve's point, these things could be used and turned against people rather than to help the society as a whole.
And I'd add that if we could, just real quickly, if we could truly fix our chronically broken mental health system and do this at the same time, walk and chew gum at the same time, that might be effective. But we're not even beginning to address the mental health system.
It's true that 1 out of 6 Americans are on some sort of psychological drug to try to stay stable, right? So it's a problem.
And 50% of Americans have some sort of a mental illness during the course of their life, and 25% of Americans at any one time have some sort of a mental illness problem.
But it's a bit of a ruse, this red flag thing, because so many of these things also occur not out of mental illness, but out of hatred. right? So to think that hatred is not a big part of what's going on when people gun down other people and think it's all a matter of mental illness is a ruse to limit the amount of limitations put on gun ownership that we should not fall for.
And not
it's
all-
a good first step. It can't be the main
the
thrust of what
only-
we're
or the
doing.
last
And
step,
not
yeah.
all
Last
mentally
step,
ill
right.
people are violent. I mean, that's another
Well, that's
misconception.
it as well. And I mean, and this was another of the pushbacks. I don't know. I go and see a doctor for depression. Does that come back someday to
Right.
haunt me in that? Oh, we see here. Can you tell us about that? Nope, no gun. No. Okay, so your constitutional right. Listen, coming up, I have in my pocket a list. A list of names. No, a list of topics that we have talked about before. They're all back in the news. We're going to go rapid fire right around the panel and get updates from them on where these topics sit, and it's happening straight ahead on Central Mass Chronicles.
We have something bad, we don't try to make it better, and we just say, that's what we deserve. We're Worcester. Elizabeth Warren is just about as warm as the shores of Lake Quinsigamon in January. Hey, there's been some big reform on Beacon Hill. Guess what? We don't pay state reps and senators to drive to work anymore.
Hi, I'm Tim Murray. The Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce is here to work alongside you and your business by promoting economic development. We're doing this by being a strong and effective advocate for the region's businesses. At the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce, we believe that a strong business community is a catalyst for a dynamic area to live and work. Join me and my guests on the Chamber Exchange on Charter TV3.
Join me on the Hank Stoltz Experience. From the politics of the region to the great events that are going on each and every weekend or every night right here in Central Mass. The action never stops on the Hank Stoltz Experience, only on Charter TV3. Steve, here we go. So I've got all of these, again, are issues that we have talked about in the past on past roundtables, which some of you may or may not have been present for, but they're back in the news again. So recycling here in the city of Worcester. We're going on 3 years now. The administration comes out with a comprehensive plan. A lot of pushback on the plastic bags that we were going to put our recycling into. My understanding is that although they have not said it publicly, that recycling going into the plastic bags, dead. What's your take?
Well, it sounds insane to me. I mean, I live in a condo association, so we have our own trash pickup, and we just bring it down to the dumpster, or we have separate bins for recycling. So I don't really understand. I suppose I lived out on the street in a single-family home or an apartment or something like that. I wouldn't have any problem using bags, even clear ones. I don't understand what the pushback is.
So the polarized cap argument, I'm with you. But I'm thinking the polarized cap people and sustainability people are going to look at me as a Neanderthal. What don't you get about how bad this is? Everyone is turning against more plastic, and you just want to be able to tie your bag so there's not a little garbage? Because I actually thought it was a pretty good plan when they came up with it.
Well, they're biodegradable plastic bags. Depends on what kind of bag you're
Well,
using.
this is part of it, right, Mark? Is that they're saying that the bags are not going to be able to be recycled. So I'm getting rid of my recycling in a bag that they're telling me is not going to be able to be recycled and is going to destroy the ozone. But I live on Union Hill, and I got litter blowing up and down the street every day.
It's easy to see how they landed here, right? In a place with very narrow streets and limited parking, especially in the winter. It's easy to see how they landed on plastics bags versus the bins. Completely get it. Now, that said, you have so many different objections to this, right? From it's a plastic bag to I have people who come down and go through my cans already. What are they going to do? Rip open the bag and now I'm going to still have stuff blowing all over the place, to those people who say the increased cost is no good. So there are so many different factions aligned against these plastic bags that they really do have to go back to the drawing board and figure something out.
Yeah, they're not going to be able to get that.
I do want to go through Randy's trash to check his tax returns.
Yeah. Well, that's it. 3 out of 4 Central Mass Chronicles panelists say plastic bags We lost.
Biodegradable
But,
plastic.
Yeah.
but
The
continue
lady-
to listen to our opinions
the
on
la-
everything else.
The lady outside my garbage, I'm sure she's going to untie it and tie it back up. She's good.
Rapid fire means different things to different people. Demolition of Mount Carmel has begun, Randy. Demolition of Mount Carmel has begun.
It's a terrible thing. You know, I was so involved with Notre Dame. You know, I was just up in Toronto in Canada where they save their churches and they make them into libraries. And we knock down some of the few left remaining honorable buildings where people put their heart and soul into building those beautiful edifices. And we let them get knocked down. I do think Notre Dame is very different than Mount Carmel. You know, Mount Carmel is a matter of the diocese, and Notre Dame was a matter of the city. And that does make a difference because who am I to tell the diocese what to do? But I am a citizen and I do pay taxes and I can tell the city my opinion on what they should have done with Notre Dame. So, you know, it's a shame in general. They're two very different situations and you hate to see it happen.
There was more of an economic component to Notre Dame, I agree, than there was to Mount Carmel. But Mount Carmel was one that, I mean, for years, and kudos to the Save Mount Carmel Preservation Society and Morrow. They just did a great job in really advocating for that and trying to get the issues out there. It's a loss for the city, there's no doubt. You know, we're heading into a new place. The Worcester is in a renaissance, and you can say those two things at the same time where you can lament the fact that they're knocking down these buildings. You know, but I do think that Notre Dame and Mount Carmel are two very different things. The Notre Dame, I'll still say, was a very wrong decision economically in the long term, and now we can quantify that. We'll be able to quantify that going forward. But Mount Carmel was just a shame simply because those two sides were never able to get together to see if there was something else that could have been done.
Yeah, agreed. It is just a shame, and I do think that this is generations will look back on this and see these as poor decisions.
If we keep tearing down historic architectural landmarks like we've been doing, Worcester will continue to slide down the slippery slope of bland, mediocre, and unattractive. Try marketing that to the people that they're trying to attract to the city. It's not going to work.
Worcester Public Markets looks as if it's going to open up. It's got some real nice tenants. It's also, though, opening up at a time in which we're having a real conversation about the Canal District and all the traffic problems down there.
Yeah.
What do you?
Well, you know, first of all, I know people who are moving in and going to be part of it. They're really excited about being down there, and it's the hopping place in this. It's the hopping part of the city, but it's a city it's a part of that's going to have their challenges, and those markets are going to have their challenges. The customers coming to those markets will have parking challenges, so the markets themselves, you're going to assume, are going to have their challenges. You know, there are a lot of smart people who spend and thoughtful people who spend a lot of time trying to come up with solutions around this. And I'm not sure that they've gotten it yet, right? All I can hope is that people, if they can walk down there, will patronize those for sure when they're open and while this construction is still going on.
That's the key. Worcester, let's walk, all right?
Yeah.
It's not that hard to walk from, I mean, they say there's 1,600 parking spaces just in the nearby area. For crying out loud, park your car at City Hall. Just walk around the city for a day.
And if you're in a walker or in a wheelchair, let's make the city more handicapped accessible. Let's have more shuttle buses instead of these land cruisers that are riding around empty half the time. Let's wake up and start becoming a real city instead of a small village.
You got to give Alan Fletcher a lot of credit. It's a beautiful building. Yep. It's consistent with its environment, but it's modern, right? He's not an out-of-town developer. He's an in-town developer that took a big financial risk to build it. But the problem with parking is whether or not Worcester is a big enough city in mentality to park and walk. And so far, there's not any evidence that we are a big enough city to do that.
I have 74 more items, but I'm going to do this one. It has to be yes or no. WRTA, fare free, yes or no?
Yes.
Fare free?
Yes.
Yes. WRTA should go fare free. The panel has spoken. Hey, join us next time right here on Central Mass Chronicles.